Okay, great. So again, I'll post the agenda in the Zoom chat. So first item up on there for today is an update on ProgPow audit. I know Hudson's not on the call. Does anyone else have anything there? Sure. Cool. So yeah, ProgPow audit. Does anyone have an update there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should speak completely on Hudson's behalf, but the proposal and kind of agreement is being finalized at the moment, so there's not many more barriers to getting this going, in my opinion. But I'll let Hudson comment on GitHub later, as he said he would.
Okay, great. So yeah, let's try to get a comment from him after the call. Agenda item number 2 is the hard fork coordination update. Anyone want to speak to that? So if no one has anything else, from the last core devs call, we actually agreed on the first 2 EAPs to implement for Istanbul. So that was nice. It seems like things are starting to move along and people are like agreeing on which EAPs are most important to decide first, because there was a pretty big dependency tree between all of them. Not sure there's much more of an update to be had there. But if anyone's interested in that, to just look at the past all core dev, because it really moved things forward. Updates on the action items from Constantinople postmortem.
I can give a brief update on that, as well as William. So last week or the week before, we kind of fixed up the emergency com template that Pooja kickstarted. I made some edits and additions, and then Lane made some comments. I'm looking at them now. I was going to try to answer all his questions and move it forward. And the second one was a different action item, which was a disclosure type document for, I guess, vulnerabilities or bug categorizations. So William began that, and I've been looking at it, adding some stuff. We're more than happy to share it with the group to also contribute. I'll leave it for William to say anything else on that topic.
Yeah, I don't really have experience writing disclosure docs, but just trying to, I mean, Charles, you passed me a few different references, so I've tried to throw together a document. I'll try and throw a link in over here to a Google Doc, but I'm very interested in feedback, and it also just needs some information filled in with who to contact. I mean, I suppose that what we're looking at are 2 different categories of bugs, either a protocol bug, which should be pretty rare, or a specific bug in clients, a specific implementation of a client, in which case people need to know how to report to each different client team, which is just information I don't have. So anybody who knows also who to contact where about what, that would be really an amazing amount of help.
So Pooja just shared the contact. Oh, okay. So she just shared that template on the chat. So when you say who to contact, would you want like a sort of contact list for like the major clients, or?
Well, and the question is going to be if it's the normal client list. A lot of times I know that there's a dedicated email address or something dedicated for bugs. It doesn't always go to the exact same address. So, I mean, team by team to know where they want bugs sent is really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's great. Like I know for us, we have like a security at email, but I don't know what Geth and Parity and other clients do. So maybe having an action item to look those up. They tend to be like publicly accessible, but hard to find.
By trail of bits, I can try to push the URL here. It's pretty complete.
No, I haven't. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't.
Cool. So anything else there?
Not on that topic, but Hudson just posted an update saying that there will be releasing the blog post soon with the ProgPal up, and action item 12.1 is no longer necessary because there might not be a delay at all with the ProgPal audit.
Okay, cool.
And one more
oh.
the Constantinople the thing. There is a PR that I have left over there where Lane made comments, and you guys can also have a look. And if everything is fixed, we can probably add it to the file. I'll share the link. I guess it's number 76. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Anything else here? Okay. Next item is the open ECA Ethereum cat holders GitHub issues. So I went through them last week and tried to ping people on them and get some closed, get some updated and what's not. There's 3 that kind of came up that I posted as like things we should discuss on this call. But aside from that, I don't think there's much more to add there unless anyone else has something. Okay, so next one is funding the funding/accounting/multisig and specifically funding for the ETH 2.0 notes.
It's just with regards to the final funding from Gitcoin. Have we received that funding now? That's all the discrepancy that was being spoken about. That's all been resolved. Question, by the way.
So what I know is that the funds have been received. They're in the multi-sig. But I haven't done any further accounting to like double check the exact amount we received, whether it's what we expected. There was a discrepancy, as you guys are all aware, previously. There's still an open issue with GitHub about that. Sorry, with Gitcoin about that. Yeah, I haven't done any further investigating on that myself.
Yeah, I looked at the number briefly, and it seems approximately correct, but I also have not scrutinized it really to make sure and double check.
Okay. I'll create an action item to perform the double check. Also, are we looking to separate the funding between ProgPal and the Ethereum cat herders fund?
I strongly support doing that. It'll just require the accounting to be complete first. I think it's in everyone's interest to do that. I don't think those 2 pools of funding were ever intended to be commingled. But I just want to raise the obvious question, like, where do the ProgPal funding funds go? Do they go into a new multi-sig? If so, like, who are the token holders?
So another question that we could help us make this is the funds from the ProgPal audit will eventually go back to the parties paying for the audit. So instead of just transferring it to a new multi-sig, we might just end up transferring, or rather paying for the service straight from the multi-sig, because it's kind of getting close to that point. But if it's worth setting up a new multi-sig for that, definitely on board. Just need kind of weighs the pros and cons.
Yeah, Charles, I think the issue here was that we received, like, so again, we should obviously let Hudson weigh in on this unless you or someone else is on top of this. I think the issue here is actually the additional funds received for the radical, I forgot what it's called.
CLR, yeah.
The CLR matching, exactly, right? Because I think the point was that more funds were raised than expected. I don't know what the use of those extra funds is supposed to be, whether it's all going to go pay for the audit or whether, like, I thought the intention was for it to do something else.
I can't completely confirm, but I thought that the extra funds would also go to the audit, but we would have to decide on that or get some clarification for sure.
So, like, to go back to the question of splitting the funds, would it maybe make sense to create a new multi-sig for the non-ProgPal funds, just so that they're split? I don't know.
I would. Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, the thing is, there were a number of cat herder related transactions in this multi-sig before those funds arrived. So I would rather. I think it's a slightly simpler accounting if we just keep this, as originally intended to be the cat herder multi-sig, and like just split out a new multi-sig for specifically for the ProgPal funds.
Got it. And Charles, like you said, these funds might just go pay the audit directly. Do you have a feeling for what the timeline would be there? Like, even if it's rough, is it like weeks, months, days?
I can't really comment on the exact timeline, but I do believe that it will be paid out upon the final contract being signed and then once the audit is completed. So it kind of follows the audit timeline.
Okay, so that means part of the funds will only be paid out when the audit is done. Is that correct?
I can't confirm that. I think we'd have to ask Hudson for the.
Okay, cool. So like, let's follow up with Hudson, but I think if like, say half the funds or whatever, some percentage of the fund is gonna have to wait a couple months to get paid anyways, it might make sense to move them out, right? If on the complete other, like the other scenario is like the contract was signed, I don't know, like in a very short amount of time and 100% of the funds were paid then it probably doesn't make sense to create the multi-sig.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I guess I'll just follow up with Hudson there and see where things are at.
Yep, create an action item for that.
Cool. Anything else on the funding / accounting / multi-sig side?
Another one, just a question from with regards to funding of note-taking. We currently fund the Ethereum core note-taking, which is 50 DAI for a meeting. We're trying to build a team of note takers that will that aren't necessarily full-time involved with the Ethereum cat herders, but have put up their hand and have been taking notes either in Ethereum 2 or are keen to start taking notes in Ethereum 1 and the Ethereum cat herders. And I'd be keen to see if we could arrange funding for note taking for Ethereum 2, if possible, from the Ethereum cat herders funding. I did approach Danny from Ethereum 2 and asked him if there's any funding available. I never heard anything back, so I suspect there's not. Previously, the funds that were paying for the Ethereum 2 notes appear to have come from Peter Gallagher himself rather than from anyone else. He was previously taking all the notes, and so he was keen to get other people to assist with that. He was paying out 100 DAI at the time. Again, decision on how much should be if we decide to go ahead with Ethereum 2 funding of notes. Also, do we look to fund the Ethereum cat herders? Because going forward, I'm not going to be taking the notes all the time myself. There will be others who will take notes. And obviously they're taking time out to take the notes themselves.
Hey, Brett. Just a slight correction from Peter for the last at least 2 or 3 months until I started helping him out. He's getting funded through Gitcoin. And based on the Bitcoin page that he had, which I can post, it looked like he had funding for about the past 3-ish before he kind of just dropped off the radar.
Okay.
So that was also funded through Gitcoin.
And he was funding it, or someone else was funding it?
I believe, I'm not the greatest at reading their setup because it just it's not very intuitive, but it looked like it was funded from a bunch of people within the Ethereum community. So it was not personally funded by him.
Okay.
The first is that we did do some experimentation with using to fund some note-taking early on, and had quite a few people apply to take notes. So I think that that's very viable. Certainly support the idea of doing that going forward. Sorry for the background noise. The other is that, who was it who took the notes for the call a few days ago? Was that, Michael, was that you?
That was Michael.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just wondering whether we were still kind of doing this in-house or whether we already were looking for third parties to do it. Cool. Thanks for doing that, Michael.
Yeah, no problem.
So just for everyone's reference, we've got within the Ethereum cat herder fold, we've got a little group called meetings and notes. And within there, there's a group of volunteers that I said that they'll be keen to take notes, and a couple of people have been added from outside of the Ethereum cat herder fold.
But I wasn't aware of that. I love that the things the cat herders are doing are growing to the point where I can no longer keep up. That's a really good sign.
So would it make sense to try and consolidate like the funding? Like if we're raising, say, because they're still relatively small amounts, like if it's 50 DAI for this call and 100 DAI for that call and 200 or whatever, and there's a couple calls a month, say, I don't know, you're probably close to roughly 1,000 DAI or so a month in total notes, if that. So I feel like if we have like either like a single Gitcoin bounty, or even, I mean, applying for like grants or things like that, like it seems like for one chunk of funding and having one address that people can contribute to, that's like this roughly 10K a year type budget, seems easier than having these ad hoc like 50 to 200 DAI bounties.
Yeah, Tim, I totally agree. And maybe that's part of the mismatch in communication, because I wasn't aware that Lane didn't know about I thought he was covered on everything we were doing. But I raised that in the meeting notes getter sometime in the last couple of weeks, just mentioning that Peter had the Gitcoin for 2.0, and it just made a lot more sense to potentially consolidate that, which seems exactly what you're suggesting now. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Is everyone taking the notes from like ETH10, ETH20, and cat herders in that Slack? Sorry, in that Gitter room, like the meeting notes one?
Yes, at this moment now.
Okay. So maybe we can have an action item to consolidate, try to consolidate the funding there and see what options would be available to get the money, and you know, at the very least having like a Gitcoin bounty up for all of them, and seeing like, does anyone disagree with this proposal? I'm happy to look into that if anyone else wants to do it, that works as well.
Just for clarification, are you suggesting we seek funding from the outside community for these notes, or my suggestion originally, and this is why I'm just raising it, was to see if the Ethereum cat herders would fund it, because we already have some funding available.
Oh. So I guess how much funding is my question.
And again, that's the question that we have at the moment. There's currently only 3 meetings: the Ethereum 1, the Ethereum 2, and the Ethereum cat herders. The Ethereum cat herders tends to be shorter than the other 2 meetings, which take more time. And I'd propose perhaps a bounty of 50 DAI for the Ethereum cat herders and 100 DAI for 1 and 2. But I'd need a quorum from everyone to decide what the right amount is.
I believe that Ethereum 1-2 is like most important meetings that people would want to see in detailed notes and not, so that we can make like DAIs, and this one maybe 50. And that's my thought.
Are you looking for anybody who would be willing to volunteer to take notes? Because I think that I'd be willing to do that.
Jim, absolutely.
Well, how would we go about doing that?
I believe you're already part of the meeting getter group, and we've got a roster in that group that we've created, so we can just simply add you to the roster, and
all right,
you'd be rostered in.
All right, I will. Okay, that sounds great.
Can someone throw the link to the note-taking getter in the chat or somewhere like that?
Yep, I'll send through.
Great, thanks.
I guess my biggest question to your point, Brett, is like, say that you have about $250, so times two, that's like $500 a month roughly in notes. How much money does the cat herders have right now? Like, how long could we actually fund that?
Charles Lane, are you able to answer that question?
I don't know because the what's it called? The ProgPow funding sitting in the wallet has made things very confusing. I really can't tell at all how much funds we have because we have to figure out the accounting for that.
So I guess we probably need like one action item around figuring that out, and then maybe a separate one around looking for alternative sources of funding if cat herders is not enough.
Yep.
Do we get any monthly funding for that? I think so. Like, I'm not sure, but I guess that we get some amount as a recurring funding there.
We did raise a significant amount in the beginning, and unfortunately, I don't have that amount to task or to hand.
I think maybe we should make an action item to actually disambiguate the funds in the account, like do a little bit of accounting and figure out where the money is coming from. I mean, if I'm willing to work with whoever might be able to do that, just like, I mean, either scan and whatnot to figure out where the different contributions came from, just so we have a clear idea of what's going on in there. I mean, aside from the actual conversation here, it sounds like we really actually need to do some paperwork here.
Agreed. From just from memory, 250 die every fortnight, I believe, is sufficiently funded by the grants that we receive. But yes, we need to sort out the accounting.
So who has a good idea?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, fine. I'm willing to make a little team on this if you'd like. I mean, who would have a good idea? Like, who can I sit with and just try and go through transactions with and try and figure things out with?
And I think the missing data point here is we need a data dump from Gitcoin, right? We just need them to give us a spreadsheet that shows all the transactions that have flowed in from at least one. If we have half the data, we can figure out the other half. You know what I mean? So that open issue in Gitcoin, which I've linked a few times, we asked them for that data and they haven't supplied it yet. So I think that's the missing piece of the puzzle. Also, I just checked, I posted the link. Gitcoin says we're getting 289 DAI per month right now into the Cat Herders Fund.
So given that, does it make sense to just go ahead and bounty the notes? Like, it's obviously like it's almost all the recurring funding we have, but it seems like that's kind of the only paid activity we're doing right now, unless I'm missing something.
Wasn't there also some funding from Streamer, or was that the original thing through Gitcoin Lane?
So part of the issue here is the way Gitcoin does accounting is very confusing because they convert everything back to DAI. So I actually don't know if that figure includes the streamer amount, but I'm almost certain it does. So I think they're just like using some exchange rate to convert the stream because we receive them as stream tokens. I think what's going on here is that they stumped up enough to cover the entire monthly amounts. That's like 250, and then the other like 39 is probably just other people who subscribe to that bounty.
Well, this may not be certainly a sufficient amount to fund all kinds of notes that we do on a monthly basis. It's the group that does it on a monthly basis. So we might be needing help over here. Maybe X2.0, if they can put something or whatever the Gitcoin, they are doing it separately. We would want to have it over here and like make one group helping out for everybody's note and like centralized thing controlling all the nodes related to Ethereum that way helping that. I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Pooja. I think first let's figure out exactly how much money we've got and how much is coming in, and then if there's a shortfall, manage how we raise the extra money going forward.
I think also Yeah, as Pooja was saying, if there is a shortfall, it's probably because now we're also talking about taking notes for Ethereum 2.0, whereas at the beginning it was only for 1.0.
Yes.
So that's where the mismatch comes from, I think.
Yep.
So does it make sense to just set up at the very like which calls are missing bounties right now? I think the 1.0 calls have bounties at this point, right?
There's not necessarily a bounty, but certainly there is has in the past been funding of 50 DAI per call.
So would it make sense to set up funding for like the 3 calls at 50 DAI, which brings us to 150, and to raise that to 100 DAI for the 2 big calls once the like accounting slash like if we have enough funding? I guess all I'm trying to say is there a way we can make sure that the people on the next calls get paid to do the notes as soon as possible in parallel to us figuring out like the accounting details?
Gitcoin, I think it's good for decentralization. It's good for accountability and transparency. We used to do it, and I think at some point we stopped because we realized we were just doing the notes ourselves, so it didn't make so much sense. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
I think
Yeah, and also
we can probably discuss this thing like not taking too much time of this call, so we can discuss this and come up with an amount that we should decide for different calls, and we should focus on how we can get more funding over here. This is technically not a working group, but we can like if we are progressing, we are taking more responsibilities. We can probably reach out to other people or maybe foundation to get a monthly funding so that we should be helpful, because this is a community thing. Many people are raising their hand to do things, and of course they would be looking for some bounty to do the job that nobody else is ready to do.
cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's move the conversation to that notes channel. If anyone I think it's a private room, the meeting notes channel. So if anyone wants to be added to it, our cat herders community is public. And then people can just request to be added from there, and whoever's in the room, I think, already can add new people to it.
Cool.
Already in the cat herders community should have permission if they have the link. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Great. So moving on, just to not take up too much of the time, update on the Ethereum development portal design slash structures slash designs slash structure. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I guess that's me. So I'd recently spoken with Nina and Alexander from play.ethereum.org, as well as a couple people looking at creating some sort of dApp hub for just dApp developers. And it seems like this will be taken on as more of a side project from other members, and probably not a primary task for the cat herd, because as you know, we're mostly project managers and not developers. So this will kind of be taken as a side project, but if anyone's willing to get involved, happy to bring you on that project as well. So just let me know if you want to add value there.
Great. Next one is website design.
Yeah, I guess that's me. There's not much to say. During the last call a couple of weeks ago, we said that maybe it would be great and it would make sense to maybe take the opportunity of Eth Berlin and DEFCON to actually, get together with some of us and maybe start thinking about it and maybe even start working on it. I think there needs to be at some point some sort of discussion in terms of what do we want to do out of the website, even just what the main purpose of the website should be. But probably our bi-weekly calls are not the best time to discuss that. So I was hoping that maybe if we meet in person, that could be a good time to do so.
Anyone else have anything to add on that?
No, hopefully I'll be in Berlin, and that'd be great to catch up in 2 couple of weeks.
Great.
Cool. Next one was the DevCon workshop proposal. So I'll post the link in the chat here, and it's linked on the agenda if anyone wants to see. So basically, I had the idea of doing a sort of cat herders town hall at DevCon, where we would open it up to the community and try to explain what cat herders is, answer people's questions, and try to get feedback from the community on what are the things they would want to see the cat herders help with. So the proposal is there. If you have any feedback, please add it. At Pegasus, we're going to kind of submit all our DevCon talks together. So that should happen in the next couple days, because I think the deadline is on the 30th. So again, these are kind of the final days to give some feedback and comments if you have any. Yeah, not sure if anyone else has anything to add there. Okay. Next. Oh, sorry, Brett.
No. Just said no.
Okay, cool. Next point was share account access. I'm not sure what that means really.
Yeah, so we've got shared accounts for Ethereum cat herders, for Google email, and for the Zoom, and for anyone who would like access to those accounts, we do have shared passwords and so on that we could provide. At the moment, Lane and myself have access to the Zoom accounts, but obviously it's available for anyone in the Ethereum cat herders to use for meetings that are related to this Ethereum space, or for one that approaches us and would like to hold a meeting, again, specifically to the Ethereum space, but doesn't have a Zoom account. We can, as the Ethereum cat herders, can facilitate that. But again, it's just to let people know that we're not holding anything back or anything like that. If you want the passwords, we can provide you with the access to the various accounts. Certainly for managing the new invites to the meetings and the calendar invites, Helena and myself currently have access to that via the Ethereum Google email. So I guess it's just open and transparent as possible.
Also, I was just thinking like Lane and Hudson currently are helping us with the live streaming thing. So if a couple of more people would know about it, would be better, because sometimes they are for some conferences and meetings and not available. So in that case, need that we get to know about it, how to do that.
Sorry, Pooja, I didn't quite get that. That was just with regards to live streaming?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, similar to, I guess, the note taking and so on, it would be helpful to have a couple of people that are, I guess, rostered to do the live streaming rather than Lane or Hudson having to do it all the time.
This came up previously. I think the only kind of issue here, and I do think we discussed this before, right, is that streaming, I think, requires like full access to the Ethereum Foundation YouTube channel. So it's a little bit harder to open that up to kind of anybody, unlike note-taking, right? Note-taking is permissionless. So just asterisk there. Obviously, this is not my decision; it's Hudson's decision. But I think we have to be a little bit more careful about live streaming. Like, I don't personally think it would be an issue for anyone who's in the cat herders and has been for a while. But again, it's not up to me; it's up to Hudson.
Yeah, okay, I'll raise it as an action item, and we can discuss perhaps together.
Anything else there? Okay, so talking about live streaming, the next agenda item was issue 29 on the cat herders. Basically, Hudson has a Google Docs about the whole live streaming stuff. I think it might make sense to copy contents there to the Ethereum PM repo. Basically, where do we want this to live outside of like some random issue on GitHub? Lane, you said we should maybe copy all of Ethereum/PM to Ethereum cat herders. So I'm just curious what the people think there. So we have all these instructions on how to run the meeting, but we don't really know where to store them. Okay, so I guess I think at the very least, I'm happy to pull up a PR against the Ethereum cat herders repo so that the document is linked somewhere, and maybe I can put one up against as well against Ethereum PM, and this way the document will just be referenced there. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Next issue was 79. What is this? Oh, this one was fun. Lane, staking, and DXDAO. Basically, Lane proposed we should stake in DXDAO. It gives us reputation on their platform. A lot of people were vocally opposed to this. So not sure where we're at with that now.
Shall I just kind of jump in here and explain for 30 seconds or 60 seconds?
Sure. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, cool. I think the biggest problem here, as with everything else in our space, is that I think people are kind of just misunderstanding like what DXDAO is and what staking means, et cetera, et cetera. Just let me be like, I think you guys are probably all aware of this, but let me be like super clear and upfront about it. This is not a for-profit thing, right? So there's no interest paid, there's no tokens granted whatsoever, right? So it's not like a lock drop or anything like that. Basically, there's 5 or 6 ways to earn reputation, and there's this initial month-long period, which ends in a few days, when you can lock ERC20 tokens, you can lock ETH, you can also participate in their Dutch auction system, you can also become an advocate for the platform on Twitter. There's like a bunch of different ways to earn reputation. And then when that initial period ends, the DAO goes live in a few days, and the reputation is non-transferable. Although it can be stored in something like a Gnosis wallet, which can be shared among multiple people with multiple keys. And basically, it just gives you the ability to participate in the DAO when it launches. And the DAO is a bit of a general purpose vehicle, right? So I read the white paper. It's sort of not explicit what it will be used for. I think it will partially govern the Dutch X auction system, which is obviously not directly relevant to us. But the DAO can do anything on Ethereum that any account can do, right? So in theory, it can be used to like pay bounties or fund projects or whatever. My main intention here was just that we should participate in the DAO and like learn how it works, because we are sort of a DAO, and we may want to kind of launch our own DAO or something at some point in the future. And hypothetically, that could be something like a DX DAO. That's kind of my intention here.
Cool. Thanks for explaining. Oh, go ahead, Charles.
It was me. It was William.
Oh.
I mean, maybe if I could just, I mean, I had in the GitHub, I put in a message saying that I was actually pretty against this. So maybe I should just clarify my own position also, which is that funds that were specifically given to us for the ProgPow audit or any other sort of funds that were allocated for a specific purpose, I don't doubt your intentions at all. I think your intentions are completely clean. But at the same time, I don't think that it's ethical for us to use those funds for anything other than their designated purpose. Like if we need to move them from account to account, I understand that's the safeguarding of the funds for their intended purpose. Even though the reputation is non-transferable and doesn't necessarily carry a monetary value with it, it still is essentially using funds given to us for an explicit purpose for some sort of side need, in this case, reputation. So I personally, I would maintain a very against pose.
So thanks for sharing that, William. I think that kind of echoed a lot of the comments that were on that issue.
Without controlling it.
Yeah. Would it still be valuable to do this if we signaled or whatever staked with the funds that are non-ProgPow, or are the ProgPow funds such an overwhelming percentage of the funds that we have that it doesn't even matter?
I think, you know, there's value in any amount. And to be clear, you can signal with things like DAI, so there's no issue there. The maximum locking period is, sorry, I think there's no minimum. I think the maximum is 30 days, but you can lock for any period you want. So yeah, I mean, you know, if we look at this as a learning experiment, which is obviously how I'm looking at it, it doesn't really matter how much we stake. But I think anything better than zero would be really great. Would be a great learning experience.
But so just for clarification quickly, when we originally received funding in the beginning, it was simply to help fund the Ethereum cat herders. Then the ProgPower funding came in. Now, we never had any specific purpose that we were going to be using the funds for within the Ethereum cat herders. It was simply a generic, please help fund the Ethereum cat herders and help us move Ethereum forward. So I think there should be no issues with using those funds within the DX DAO. I agree, however, with William, where the funds have been given specifically for ProgPower, we should not be using that for anything else other than ProgPower.
And to be clear,
Yeah.
I also don't mind the non-ProgPow funds also that are generally given to the cat herders to use at their discretion. I see no reason not to include this in our discretion.
Gives us a bigger reason to try and sort out the accounting then pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, and that's kind of what I was hinting at. Like, if we had so little cat herders general funds that it didn't even matter, then it might not be worth it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So if we have some cat herders funds, I think it's definitely worth trying this with them. But then the challenge is how do we set that up as soon as possible? And if we want a new multi-sig to like stake from, then it kind of gets back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, should we just move the non-ProgPow funds to a new multi-sig and stake from those? Or should we move the ProgPow funds out of the current multi-sig and stake with the current multi-sig?
So I think we're going to miss the window probably in that case. Like, the accounting is not going to be sorted out in the next day or two, and this would have to be done in the next day or two maximum. So I think the only option may be to just do it with a very small amount, like take 100 DAI, for example, which we know that, you know, comes out of the cat herder portion, and use that, which I think is perfectly reasonable. I'm happy to do that. It does make the accounting slightly harder. One other quick thought is that the only mandate for the cat herder funds was to fund note taking. So there was that specific mandate, but I mean, I think to the extent that we're still able to do that, there's no issue. And one other thing I want to just go on the record as saying, because I know you guys already know this, but you know, in no way, shape, or form did I ever suggest that we should spend any of those funds that were designated for the ProgPow audit. Again, I think you guys already know that this is just like a locking mechanism. Finally, again, I think it was a mistake to commingle those two sets of funds in the first place, so let's definitely get that sorted out as soon as possible. I'll help with that as well.
Okay, great. So does anyone disagree with taking 100 DAI, putting that in a new multi-sig, having a couple people from cat herders on that multi-sig, and staking from there?
I'm in favor.
Very
I
in
don't have any
favor.
problem with that.
Okay, great. So let's have an action for that. Lane, I think it probably makes the most sense for you to take the lead up on there. Yeah, and just like keep us posted in the cat herders channel.
Cool. Yeah, so I'll set up, technically it's not a multi-sig, it's called Gnosis Wallet, which is also good for us to experiment with as well, because it's sort of the successor to the multi-sig. It has more functionality. If you would like to be a part of that, then just indicate that on Gitter or Telegram or wherever, and I'll make sure you're included in that.
Sounds good. So our last thing to talk about, or sorry, issue to talk about on the agenda was this one increased multi-sig security, but Hudson had a point there, so I'm not sure if we want to wait for him to actually chat about that. I guess, does anyone else have an update on the increased multi-sig security?
No.
Okay, cool. So let's move on. Review. Oh, go ahead. Okay.
Oh, also an update from earlier. So upon the signatures of the contract for ProgPow audit, there will be 15,000 DAI sent from the cat herders funds, and then the rest from the other parties throughout the timeline, and then at the end, the final payment will go out then. So the funds will likely, some of them will still remain in the wallet for weeks or month or whatever the timeline is. And
Yeah.
then so we should definitely chat about that. But there is 15,000 DAI that will be sent upon the signature, or approximate number. I'm not confirming
Cool.
that. Yeah.
Cool. So in that case, it's probably worth setting up a separate wallet for those funds. And like, depending on how long that it takes for us to do that 15,000 DAI payment, those will just either never go to that new wallet, or we'll just send them from there. Does that make sense for everyone?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So any other business, or should we review the action items?
Just a quick one, just with regards to Ethereum 2. Obviously, we've just started doing some note taking, but originally we had some ideas specifically with trying to capture where the teams are and so on, and perhaps present it in a more readable form for everyone to see. It'd be good to form some sort of a working group around the Ethereum 2 discussion. With those who are interested, if you could just drop your names in the getter.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Since we are planning to combine these things to making for F1, F2, and everything else, so we should be continuing the funds, like to add that who has taken the note for the way we used to fund and maintain our own funding funds. So we just write the note taking for this meeting over there. Start including F2 in there as well. Right now we are doing it for F1 only.
Sorry, I don't understand that. So what are we doing for F1 only?
We are creating an issue in ECH GitHub saying that funding for this note F1 note taking on to be given to this person. So similarly, if we are going ahead with 2, should we start making it a practice of writing it there for F2 as well, and we can merge that in our accounting?
I think that makes sense. Does anyone disagree? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's worth doing.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else anyone wants to bring up? Okay, moving on to the action items as we wrap up. So 9.1, I think we talked about this. The Hudson's to work with Charles on making a post about the ProgPow audit. We touched on this at the beginning. 9.4, multi-sig K holders to work on separating the funds. We talked a lot about that. 11.1, cat herders to review the document created by Pooja. This is the same one you shared earlier, right?
Yeah, same what we discussed.
Okay, great. 11.3, set up a call with the Ethereum development portal stakeholders. Any update there? No.
Charles?
Oh, Charles.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you repeat that?
So setting up a call with the development portal stakeholders.
Yeah, so that already happened.
Okay, great. 12.1, Hudson to propose action plan for ProgPow hard fork delay. So I think we've talked about that significantly on our core devs. And it seems like the audit might happen. So Charles, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, so I believe Hudson had said that that 12.1 is no longer needed because there might not be
Oh, that's true. Yes, you're right. Good point. And 12.2, continue to look into the discrepancy with Gitcoin bounty amount. I think we also covered that at length today. So anything else anyone wants to wrap up with?
Just a curious question. Sometimes we work on HERDS tokens. So is there anything that we are going ahead and doing with that? Just curious about it.
With what token? Sorry.
Hertz token, I guess.
Oh, yeah, it's true. We had those, right?
Yeah. So I was just wondering, like, what are we doing with that, or if we are planning to use that in future for some of the activities, or how we are going about that. I guess Hugo, you were the person helping with that, or
Sorry, push it again.
I'm not sure. You with that Hertz token, or who was
So the her token was created by Chris Hopcroft.
Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's certainly worthwhile keeping it open and transparent. I know we've just had our little discussion, certainly with things like how much funding should be placed on taking notes for the Eth2 and Eth1 and Ethereum cat herders. Maybe what I'll do after this is I'll jump onto the DAO and I'll raise some questions. We'll basically vote to decide how much we should be putting as a bounty for these notes, just so we get it open and honest and transparent, so everyone can see that everyone has had a bit of a say.
I think that would be a good idea.
Practice what we preach.
Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, just one small thing. Getting back to the accounting thing, the accounting issue. Has anyone been appointing, such as leading the whole accounting thing, in terms of, seeing, well, just what we discussed today? Because I feel like this is going to be an issue for the next call, but no one's going to lead on it.
Yep. William, you showed some interest. Would you be able to run with that?
So, sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Hugo just said who's going to take the lead on the accounting.
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool, thanks, mate. Thank you, Hugo.
Sure.
Cool. So we're on time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.